production managers who oversee, production assistants, and then the production assistant kind of does the job that nobody else wants to do in a way. I mean, it's getting sent to pick up porta potties because everybody above you forgot that we were going to be shooting in the woods for 6 hours and you have to provide a bathroom. Or, one of the actors has a cough and he needs a specific brand of cough drop, that sort of thing. And it's just it's a problem-solving oriented position. From there, I moved up to being an assistant director, which is, oh, rad! I just saw somebody in the chat say they are in the industry. They're an actor, so this is old hat to you then. Probably explain this as well as I could. No, an assistant director is sort of the, knowing Dan, there's a few Star Wars fans in the room. The assistant director is the Darth Vader of the operation. The Emperor, the director, has her will, and then the assistant director is not so much making creative decisions, but executing it. Like the most recent thing that I AD'd on was a series of Xfinity commercials that would have aired during the Olympics this year. Who knows when you'll see them. But when the director decided that, we needed to be on this BMX track at 11 a.m. and the track wasn't super well maintained, it was kind of on production and the assistant directors to get that track into shape. I'm not really sure what else to... Oh, your dad's a creative director. That's super rad.
So I know a lot of times you mention NDAs. You get a lot of those in the film industry, right?
Yeah, non-disclosure agreements. It's all, it's all very secretive and very proprietary. Big word for people keeping secrets for unclear reasons, but...
So yes, non-disclosure agreements, you have to keep things secret.
Yeah, when you sign on to a project, a lot of times you'll kind of sign a contract that says that you won't talk about anything that you see or whatever. I worked on the motion capture unit, motion capture is super interesting. We could probably talk about that for a half hour. That's where an actor has like a lot of reflective markers all over like a tight suit. You've probably seen it on television or whatever. And even on their face. And then the room is filled with hundreds of cameras that essentially sense where the markers are in space. And it can translate an actor's motions to an animated character. I got to work on the motion capture unit for Spider-Man Far From Home. And that NDA was like a novel. That was, I don't want to spoil the movie in case people haven't seen it yet, but we kind of tackled every fight scene and therefore a bunch of death scenes. And it was hard because I don't know, keeping secrets about something that your friends are so excited for is tricky.
Okay. So I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of remember you saying you worked with the Muppets once, right?
I didn't work with the Muppets. No, I was supposed to. But a friend of mine worked with the Muppets. Actually, one of the ADs that I usually work with, he worked with the Muppets at Disneyland on a Disney commercial. And it kind of, it speaks to, like with every talent, every actor that you work with, there's unique, oh, right on, somebody's a fan of Far From Home. That was the most fun I've had on set, I think. There's unique challenges with every production, and I absolutely love my job, Nolan. I couldn't see myself doing anything else. But on the Muppets, like my friend was saying, like you talk to the puppet. Like Dave Gell's puppeteers Gonzo, but under no circumstances do you speak to Dave. Like part of the way that working with characters like that is you talk to Gonzo and you tell Gonzo what you need Gonzo to do. And Dave will make it happen. I mean, it's not like it's not like he's crazy or something. He knows that you know that he's there, but it's one of the trickiest parts of production and working with different directors and actors is kind of accommodating everybody's creative process. Regarding how to get a job, yeah, please keep the questions coming. That varies. I definitely would recommend going to school. Because my freshman year of college, I mean, I went to college in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. I'm in Los Angeles now, but um, a small production happened to be in town, and they reached out to the college and they wanted production assistants. And I think most people that I know went to college, and while you don't need the degree to get the job, college is kind of where you make the connections. Film school, college, art school, whatever. That's true for me, and that's true for just about everybody I know. Um, how was it meeting Tom Holland? Tom Holland was awesome. A lot of times you'll meet somebody super famous and like it's a persona because they're actors and being somebody else is what they do for a living, and it's all about their image, and it's all about like it's not a bad thing, but like Harrison Ford likes to seem grumpy, but Harrison Ford is not grumpy. He's actually super nice and kind of anxious. Tom Holland is exactly what you think he would be. He is just a happy nerd, and he's always spilling secrets about upcoming Marvel stuff, just like in the interviews. He's fantastic. And he bought everybody Starbucks, which is a nice plus because I like coffee. Theater merit badge next week. That's fantastic. What does that entail? Is that acting or behind the scenes?
Theater merit badge is all about acting. It's not one
Okay.
we're offering with our Camp in the Box, but I know there's other Camp in the Box and other camps going on, so he's probably taking it.
Yeah. I have worked on a couple live shows too, and I think the main difference between like on-camera acting and theater acting is you're playing to the back of the house. Play it big. Don't exaggerate it, but make sure that everything you're doing is something that somebody sitting in the back of the room could pick up on. Most famous film I took part in was uh, probably Spider-Man, I think. Favorite actor that I worked with actually wasn't an actor, but right at the start of my career, like my first paid job was doing some production assistant stuff for a behind the scenes crew on a BB King concert that was happening at the United States Capitol for Memorial Day 2011. And BB King was just the most, he's a blues legend. He's been gone for a few years, but he's one of the most famous guitar players who ever lived. And he was just so down to earth because you see these ridiculous demands and you see stars wanting a certain kind of food in their trailer and whatever else. BB King wanted a hamburger. And if you couldn't do that, he wanted a sandwich. Like he was just such a down to earth person. And it's refreshing. Have I ever been in a movie? I have not. There have been a couple times that I've had to drive my car in the background of a scene on a television show because we didn't have enough cars, and when I was a PA, like it was sometimes you have too many PAs and they give you busy work like that. You write comedy scenes and do improv. That is fantastic. I used to do improv myself in college. That's super fantastic. Follow through with that. I feel like improv definitely prepared me for this. It's a life skill that a lot of people don't have. What movies have I done? So many. I mostly have done commercials. If you've seen the State Farm commercials with Jake from State Farm, I actually have done a lot of those. Jake from State Farm is a super cool guy. So is Alfonso Ribeiro, Carlton from The Fresh Prince, which is before everybody's time. But yeah, have I worked on Spider-Man 3? I have not. I don't know how far along on shooting they even are with that, but the motion capture is done. So Spider-Man 2, you probably know, like that was shot all over the world because he was traveling all over the world and they actually went to those places. And then after filming that is when we came in, because with motion capture, it's the animated characters. So like Hydro Man in the movie is like a big water monster, but for us, it was just a stunt guy in a suit that translates his motions to the animated character. And I think they're pretty far off from doing that kind of stuff with Spider-Man 3. How was to meet Spider-Man? Oh, right on. Okay, they'll be done in February, so that's good news. I'll try to clear my calendar for February and March then, in case I get that call. Meeting Spider-Man was fantastic. Tom Holland, he was just super down to earth, super fun. We talked about video games a lot, actually. And thank you. I'm glad you joined this call too, Jack. That actually, speaking of like keeping my schedule clear, one of the more difficult things about kind of landing a job in film is that you don't really land a job. It's all freelance, which means you're not, like, I'm not employed by Marvel Studios. I just did the Spider-Man job. A friend of mine actually was producing it, and she called me and was like, hey, we need a camera production assistant for this. She couldn't tell me what it was until I signed on, but she told me I would certainly want to do it. But that's like, after that, then I would get a call to work on a commercial. Like, you're always looking for work. And if you are thinking about getting into it, I think that's why it's important to have a wide variety of skills. Like somebody mentioned doing improv, like learn as many skills as you can, because there will be more work opportunities for you. My favorite video game is actually the same as Tom Holland's, Red Dead Redemption, all the way. How are movies being filmed during the pandemic? That is a fantastic question. It varies. Right now, Los Angeles just went back to work. I have not been on set yet, but they're discouraging crowd scenes. There's a new position called the COVID compliance officer that a lot of my friends have been training to do, where you're basically making sure people stay 6 feet apart, people follow appropriate practices, tools are being sanitized. It does not sound like a fun job, but it's important. In places like, I know a lot of commercials have been shot in New Zealand. Rian Johnson, who directed The Last Jedi, a lot of directors will do commercials on the side. And Rian Johnson has been directing commercials remotely. There's a crew in New Zealand actually shooting them because they've more or less gotten the pandemic under control. And he's like zooming in from Los Angeles. There's a lot of that. It's a game changer. Do I work on any animated movies? I do not. I have a couple of friends, neighbor actually, who work at DreamWorks, and it's a very different industry altogether. How do you advertise yourself? That is an excellent question. I believe you were the one who said that you were an actor, so you get like, you have to keep. Oh, that's interesting. You would have to film it at home. That makes sense because a lot of late night shows are shooting at home and stuff. I would say it's all about just staying in touch with people, networking. On any job, just make sure to talk to anybody you can, make it known what you do, make it known what you want to do. Some of the best advice I got was towards the start of my career, I told, actually, Dan, this was Ki Chan, who you know. I told a friend of mine that I wanted to be a producer. And he said, don't say I want to be a producer, just I am a producer. It's communicating your intent is a key to advertising yourself. Do you get paid well? Everybody would say not well enough. It varies, there's a lot of PAs will make minimum wage. Some shows pay more. Assistant director rates are all over the map. You should really sit down and figure out what your time is worth, I think. What else do we got? Star Wars and Marvel movies are my favorite, Jack says. Definitely same here, especially Star Wars. What shows have I worked on? So much. Political Animals was my first network show that didn't last much. Mostly commercials. I haven't done a lot of series TV. There's a lot of work opportunities present themselves with pilots, which are where a company will make the first episode of a TV show they want to make. And they kind of throw money at that, make it as good as they can, and try and convince the studio or the network or whatever to pick up the series. Most pilots never go any farther than that first episode. So I've worked on far more pilots than I have shows that have actually gone to the network. Have I worked on Disney Channel? I have not, which is a little surprising because I live near Burbank, where a lot of that is shot. I would like to. What else do we got? Would I want to go back to Marvel or work for Lucasfilm? Oh man, I would love to work for Lucasfilm. I have a good friend named Will who did a lot of costume assistant stuff and production assistant stuff on the last 3 Star Wars movies. He signed on to Last Jedi, and he worked through Solo and Rise of Skywalker. A lot of what Lucasfilm shoots, almost all of what Lucasfilm shoots, except for the Mandalorian television series, is in London. So that's difficult, but the Mandalorian is in Los Angeles, so you better believe I am networking like crazy and making it known to everyone that I would love to be on that. How far into production are you hired? It varies. I mean, Political Animals was still crewing up on its like 2nd or 3rd day, but it's usually shortly before production in terms of hiring production people. When I've done assistant director stuff, that's usually a little further out. But when I was a production assistant, sometimes you'd be getting the call the night before. I think the further you get down the ladder, the later they're hired, because it's almost like an afterthought. And that doesn't mean they're not important. It just means you put it together from the top down. It's like the adage, the problem with political jokes is sometimes they get elected. Yes, absolutely. There were some characters in Political Animals that should not have been elected. Do you travel a lot for your profession? I have not traveled a whole lot. When I lived on the East Coast in Philly, I would go down to Washington sometimes. But for the most part, people try to hire a local crew. Like a year and a half ago, I worked on a really strange documentary series where we followed the grandson of Charles Manson, the killer, all around the state of California, all up and down, visiting people who had been affected by his grandfather's actions as he kind of learned about his family history. And that was a lot of fun, but it was exhausting. It was, a different hotel every night, a different city every day. The rock star life without the rock star money. And so I decided to kind of stick more local as best I can. Oh, wow, you flew to South Korea for a job? That's wild. I think the farthest I've traveled is just a couple states over. I know I've gone to Vegas from Los Angeles. I have not gone to South Korea, but that's super fascinating. Oh, you flew there to adopt your sister. I thought you went there for a job. The furthest I've traveled is probably Germany. But that was for, like I said, diversify your skills. I also do some freelance writing, like entertainment journalism. And I was involved with a podcast that Dan will remember called All Wings Report In. And that led me to cover a Star Wars convention in Germany where it was different Kathleen Kennedy and Ben Burt and different kind of entertainment industry leaders talking about what they were hoping to do with Star Wars right after Disney acquired it. But yeah, I would say I was trying to think about what was the worst advice or the biggest mistakes that I got when I was trying to, in reference to the Charles Manson, the worst advice or the biggest mistakes that I made, and I think it was, I waited for opportunities to come to me without kind of making them myself. I mean, look, we're all living in a time when everyone has an HD camera in their pocket, pretty much. It's never been easier to make a movie, but that means it's also never been easier to get your movies seen. And it's really only recently that I've started kind of trying to pursue my own projects and pitch documentaries. But the biggest mistake I've ever made is not doing that sooner. Like, if you have a camera, you can make a movie. And if you think you want to be in production and eventually be producing, start producing, because there's the hardest movie you'll ever make is the first. And then, after that, you kind of know your strengths and weaknesses and know what to build on.
Speaking of, having a camera and making your
Yeah.
own movies and stuff like that right now, you actually did a few fan films for fun that you oversaw the whole thing of. One animated, Power,
Yeah.
another one documentary about a Leia costumer. You want to talk about how those were compared to the industry a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think an important part, they kind of helped me not get burnt out at times when things were not going so great for me. But what's my favorite song? That's a good question. Probably, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of looking at the chat while I'm answering your question as well. That's a good question. I think my favorite song is 10 Things by Paul Barabeau. Anyway, um, yeah, so it was always important to kind of have side projects of my own to avoid getting kind of burnt out and run down, and just remember why I wanted to make movies in the first place, which was to tell stories. And like Dan said, like, we kind of worked together on an animated cartoon about a Star Wars robot, a gonk droid that had dreams of being a hero. And it was just interesting to, like, even to go to industry friends like animators and sound designers and stuff and say, like, hey, I'm doing this fun project, no pressure or anything, there's no money in it, but let's put our talents together and make something awesome. And that was a good feeling. And then, like he said, like, going to school forced me to make movies. I mean, I was churning out a short a month because I had to for classes. And it was kind of an opportunity like nowhere else to have access to all this professional equipment. At college, I went to Penn State, but tell the stories that I wanted to tell. Like, my documentary was about my girlfriend dresses up like Princess Leia for fun, but also goes to children's hospitals and stuff. And it was about how that has affected her. And while it might be difficult to kind of secure funding and rights for that in Hollywood or whatever, going to film school afforded me the opportunity to tell those stories and sort of prove my skills in a comfortable environment. What job in the industry do you want to have in the future? What title or position? I mean, as far as working on other stuff, I really like being an assistant director, and I'd like to continue that. It would be cool to be writing. I think if I were in any other field, it would be in a writer's room, just pitching jokes, pitching stories, telling stories. What were the fan films called? The animated one is Star Wars Power Trip, and the documentary about the Leia costumer is I think it's Life as Leia. You were flown out to California for a callback and you were in the top 2. Oh man, I mean, a callback alone is an achievement, so congrats. What was I going to college for at first? I was actually always going to college for film. I have the stereotypical story where my mother wanted me to be a lawyer and whatever, but it was always film. What is your favorite Star Wars movie? My favorite Star Wars movie is either the first or The Last Jedi. By the first, I mean A New Hope, the original. It says How to Stop Time Warp from Danny Burns. I am not sure what you mean. But yeah, what else? What else haven't we?
I think we're getting close to time on the presentation.
How to stop time warp? Oh, stop motion? Like stop motion animation, like where you kind of animate like a Lego or a toy? Okay, yeah. So I haven't done too much with stop motion. They did teach us that in school, but basically a video like this video is an illusion. It's 24 pictures per second, 24 to 30 depending. and it makes it look like it's moving because your eye can't process that many pictures at once. So stop motion is just taking that idea and applying it to actual photos. You can get away with 12 pictures per second, but you take a picture of a doll or a toy or whatever, and then you move it, and then you take another picture, and then you move it. And if you move it enough, but not too much, when you put those pictures together in an editing program like iMovie or Premiere or whatever, it looks like the toy is moving, which is pretty cool. There are entire feature films made that way, like the Wallace and Gromit movies and stuff. Oh, you did a stop motion Lego car crash? Car crashes are tricky with stop motion. I did something like that in college, and it's tricky because of just having it break apart and look convincing. That's really cool. That's super awesome that they started you on that.
Okay, so I think that's almost all the time we have. I do have one last question. So is there any advice that you would give to our scouts here if they are considering a career in the film industry?
Yes. Definitely network. Talk to everybody, but even before that, I mean, that's advice for college, but go to school. But even before that, start making movies. If a school project offers like the opportunity to do a video, or if scouting has opportunities to do a video, do it. Just start making movies. And watch movies too, figure out what you like, what you don't like, but make movies. If you're on a video chat, you have a camera. So don't get bogged down if you don't have like a lighting setup or whatever. It doesn't even have to be a particularly good camera. It could be a cell phone. If you want to make movies, make movies.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed this. I've known Ryan for a number of years, and he's always got interesting stories. He's a fantastic guy. So for the rest of you, remember, opening at 8:45 in the morning. If you are still having trouble getting into your classrooms for your merit badges, Scouts BSA, make sure you reach out to Mr. Zayas. He'll get you connected. Cub Scouts, if you're having any problems with your crafts, make sure you email Mrs. Gifford, and she'll help you with those. And I hope you had a good time, and thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
Let's give Ryan a big round of applause for joining us today. Okay. All right, everyone. Take care.
See you later.